Coming in at number 10, we've got an honorable mention for the time that the immortal Hulk buried a similarly immortal villain alive within a mountain, in an incident that was a bit less embarrassing and a bit more existentially terrifying. While on the run, the Hulk found himself running into a mad scientist known as Dr. Fry, who had attempted to conquer death through the use of gamma radiation and had accidentally both poisoned his hometown and turned himself into a glowing skeletal creature that would cannibalize anyone stumbling across his mountain cave. Since he was unable to kill him, the Hulk wound up trapping Dr. Fry within his mountain cave without the use of his arms or legs, essentially burying him alive. Note to self: do not get on the Hulk's bad side while also being immortal. Coming in at number 9, we've got either the best or worst Hulk pun of all time used against the Red King. Following his exile from planet Earth, the Hulk found himself as a gladiator combatant on the planet Sakaar, battling in fights overseen by the cruel leader of the planet, Angmo Asan, aka the Red King. In a final battle to take back the planet, the Hulk led a force of rebels against their captors, and went head-to-head against the Red King inside his own arena in a sword duel to the death. And while the fight itself was pretty cool, the icing on the cake was the final pun as the Hulk defeated his foe with his sword and cried out, "Hulk slash." Coming in at number 8, we have the Incredible Hulk vs. Black Bolt, King of the Inhumans. Following the Hulk's extended stay on Sakaar, and following the death of the love that he'd found on the planet, the Hulk began making his way back to Earth to face off against the heroes that had sent him into the cosmos in the first place. He was intercepted on the Earth's moon by Black Bolt, who used his incredibly destructive voice to whisper enough at the Hulk when he refused to back down. An attack that likely would have killed anyone else, but left the Hulk still standing, grinning, and saying, "I didn't come here for a whisper, I want to hear you scream," which just might be the most badass thing ever dared to be said to Black Bolt.
Number 7. Revenge for Gwen. This one left average moviegoers stunned in theaters when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 hit the big screen. Because of course we finally had to see the moment where Gwen Stacy meets her fate. Of course this comes from the comics, specifically in issue 121 of The Amazing Spider-Man. The Green Goblin drops her off the Brooklyn Bridge, and although Peter has his trusty webs, sometimes the angle just doesn't work out for the best, and Gwen's neck ended up snapping from the momentum. Eagle-eye fans could spot that the clock tower in the part in the movie struck 12:10, which is a reference to the comic book 121. So the Green Goblin continued to taunt Spider-Man afterwards while he was trying to cope with being partly responsible for the love of his life's death. Spider-Man gets his revenge though in the very next issue, and it's pretty sweet, when a well-timed backflip results in the Green Goblin stabbing himself with his own glider. Number 6. Deadpool and Ajax.
You can't fix me?
It sounds even stupider when you say it.
Like the kind of stupid who admits he can't do the one thing I'm keeping him alive for?
The 2016 Deadpool movie is one of my favorite movies ever. I mean, of course, I'm thrilled to see Deadpool come to the MCU with that nice, juicy R rating. Let's go, come back home. But in a list about revenge, Wade vs. Ajax is a must include. In a storyline called Payback, Ajax was trying to hunt down Deadpool for trying to kill him earlier. And Deadpool wanted payback against Ajax for putting him and others through torture, and the death of Wade's friend, Worm, of course, didn't help. So when Ajax tried to kill Deadpool again, it wasn't that easy. The tides changed because now Deadpool ended up snapping his neck. In the movie, Wade pulls the trigger on Ajax right as Colossus is giving a motivational speech on why you shouldn't kill people, and the timing is creme de la creme. Number 5, Hit Girl and Mobsters. So we're back again looking at the work of Mark Miller, like I mentioned earlier. So if we're talking about Wanted, we have to talk about Hit Girl and Kick-Ass, played by the incredibly talented Chloe Grace Moretz. Okay, so after her father, aka Big Daddy, aka Nicolas Cage, began training Mindy at a young age to be a violent assassin, stylized in the comics that Big Daddy loved to read. So the mob boss, Frank D'Amico, framed Damon Big Daddy McCready. He was put in jail, and then his wife, Mindy, committed suicide. So Hit Girl's mother committed suicide as well. So now she only has one parent, and he's in jail. So afterwards, he trains himself and young Mindy, really young Mindy, to be these killer, brutal assassins. Down the road, we have, of course, Kick-Ass in the picture, and Red Mist tricks him into revealing the whereabouts of Big Daddy and Hit Girl. So Frank's men took Kick-Ass and Big Daddy, leaving the revenge on just Hit Girl. So Hit Girl stormed the hideout and fought all of Frank's men. And when I say fought, I mean brutally killed them, is what I guess a better term for it. But Big Daddy was lit on fire during this madness, and he didn't make it. But don't worry, she had the last laugh. or at least the last shot. Number 4, Bullseye and Daredevil. When her father was killed, Elektra dropped out of school and decided the way to go was, of course, to become an assassin. Similar theme throughout this entire list. So for many years, she worked as a bounty hunter. She took a contract in New York and eventually crossed paths with Daredevil, which is just the coolest part from the movie, which we all remember. So they worked together and they fought Bullseye, but Matt wasn't on board with her profession, but they remained close nonetheless. They were still good friends. Then Kingpin hired Elektra as his chief assassin and was sent to kill Ben Urich, but Daredevil intervened. So Kingpin told her to kill Matt's best friend, Foggy, as payback. But Foggy recognized her and she couldn't end up doing it. She couldn't carry it out. So in the Death and Resurrection storyline, Bullseye figured the best way to make it back on top of Kingpin's list, he had to kill Elektra, and then he did, using her own side. So revenge is of course in order. Daredevil hunted down Bullseye and during the fight allowed Bullseye to fall from a telephone pole, shattering his spine.
Number 4, bad karaoke for Maverick and Merchant. Later on in the current Wolverine series, Maverick would take a job from Merchant, deciding in the end to work with him despite Merchant attempting to auction him off previously, and thereby putting Maverick in the crosshairs of Wolverine. With the two at odds fighting over information stored on a Krakoan bug, Wolverine in the end decided to let Maverick think he stole that bug back from him and his friend CIA agent Jeff Bannister, only for Maverick to learn later while handing it over to Merchant that the bug was actually wiped clean and the information on it replaced with tons of Johnny Cash karaoke, likely taken from performances at the Green Lagoon's karaoke night. Oh boy.
Coming in at number 3, we have the Hulk killing Maestro with the explosion that created him in the first place. Bruce Banner often has to face off against different mental versions of the Hulk inside his head, but this alternate version of himself from a post-apocalyptic future is the real deal. Naming himself Maestro after conquering what remains of America following a nuclear winter, this version of the Hulk had become far stronger than the Hulk's usual starting strength, with years of sucking up deadly radiation only improving his ferocity and power. When the real Hulk encountered this warlord version of himself, the only way he was able to finally come out on top was by literally warping the Maestro back in time to be killed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk back in the 60s. A nice bit of circular karma that showed that Bruce Banner could outwit even his older self. Coming in at number 2, we have Zombie Hulk versus Zombie Thanos. The Hulk and Thanos might not have gone to get a proper physical rematch in the MCU, but in the Marvel multiverse, their zombie versions had a fight that has to be seen to be believed. 40 years after the initial infection that turned their universe into an undead wasteland, a zombified Thanos decides to pick a fight with an undead Hulk, claiming that the Hulk has eaten more flesh than his fair share. With the eloquence that only a zombie can provide, the Hulk responded by crushing Thanos' skull between his clapping palms, instantly destroying the weakened Mad Titan and showing that maybe you shouldn't tell the Hulk he's been eating too much lately.
Coming in number 10, we have X-23. If you come within 100 meters of Wolverine, you can bet that your life is about to get a lot more depressing. This dude has some terrible mojo with him, and if I was him, I would want to have a word with the Watcher because it seems like someone else should have to bear some of this load. If you're a clone of Wolverine, you can bet that you're going to have a very similar life. X-23 was cooked up in a lab and trained to be a living weapon. And by trained, I mean tortured for years until she was able to escape. There's a laundry list of people that she probably wants to kill, but the man who would be most deserving of her wrath would be Xander Rice, the scientist who tormented her for years. Well, here's the thing. If you're going to make a living weapon that has thoughts, feelings, and memories, you might want to make sure that you're nicer to her because you don't want that weapon turning on you. Eventually, X-23 makes her way to Rice and he receives a beatdown that lasts for 10 minutes. There was literally a timer in the comics that showcased how long he got smashed for. I couldn't last in a 10-minute long fight, period. It doesn't matter who I'm fighting, I don't have the cardio. Could you imagine fighting one of Wolverine's clones for 10 minutes? They would have to invent a new word for the type of concussion I would have. Coming in number 9, we have Robin Becomes a Clown. Who knew that The Dark Knight Returns would get a sequel? I didn't know you could return twice. But in this story, we have a superhero revenge that really strikes to the core of Batman. Robin, Dick Grayson, becomes the Joker. Just when he thought he finally got rid of him, now he has to deal with an even worse version. What happens is Batman fires Robin from being Robin, which is kinda lame. It's not like you can put that on a resume and just find a new super gig somewhere else. Also, you pulled him into this world. So to get revenge on the old dusty Batman, Dick Grayson becomes the Joker. Coming in at number 8, we have Superman ends the Joker. We know that Batman and Superman have their ways of dealing with villains, and even if it isn't the most effective way, it seems like these guys keep breaking out and causing harm, but it's comic books, what can you do? It's part of the fun. But we know that Batman and Superman don't like to kill, it's against their code of ethics, and even though there have been a few instances where Superman has killed, like when he sentenced Zod to death, he sort of killed him inadvertently there, but for the most part, Supes tries to keep his hands clean. Well, there was one time when they got covered in blood, literally and figuratively. In the excellent DC fighting game Injustice Gods Among Us, there was actually a pretty thought out story for a fighter. It starts out with Joker setting up a bomb in Metropolis. He starts to branch out and mess with other heroes. Well, the bomb kills Lois Lane, and then Superman promptly goes insane. He flies down to the prison where Joker is being held, and then he smashes his hand right through his chest, and then he goes on to take over the Earth with any of the heroes that will stand with him in his new dictator style of ruling. Wonder Woman says yes, Batman says no, and then we got a game on our hands, ladies and gentlemen.
Number 7, Avon Calling. Not necessarily a great supervillain of Wolverine's per se, but in issue number 30 of the original Wolverine series, Wolverine managed to embarrass a whole team of Madripoorian militia and palace guards when he was dealing with the masterminds behind the Lazarus Project. As he and his allies aim to infiltrate the palace and confront General Coy, Broker, not to be confused with the Power Broker, and Dr. Page, Wolverine walks right up to the guard, and when he asks who goes there, answers Avon Calling. Wolverine can be nonchalant and make jokes here because he's got Karma on his team. Rather than respond with an attack, Karma basically takes hold of the guard's mind and then has him take them into the palace under the guise of his prisoners. Of course, this ruse doesn't last for too long, but it does last long enough to get them into the palace at least, and to basically where they need to go. Number 6, Ruined Merchant's Auction. When Wolverine donned his patch disguise to return once more to Madripoor, it was quickly revealed to him that everyone kinda already knew who he was. And while he had come to save a former teammate from being auctioned off as a weapon, he himself ended up on the auctioning block. But although the merchant saw his presence as an opportunity, in the end he realized his mistake, as Wolverine didn't just get away with Maverick as intended, but pretty much ruined his whole auction and Merchant's whole catalog besides. You can check out how badly Wolverine ruined this party by checking out issues number 9 and 10 of the 2020 Wolverine series. Number 5, Resisted the Change. Wolverine's healing factor doesn't just protect him from severe injuries, it also protects him against supernatural related monster rules, such as how they dictate transformations. And if he does end up getting affected by said rules, the change is typically only temporary for him. Eventually his healing factor will basically cure him. Case in point, when Old Man Logan faced off with Dracula during his hunt for Jubilee. Dracula managed to attack Wolverine and even bite him in this second volume of Old Man Logan, but the joke was on Drac. Wolverine's healing factor protected him from giving into vampirism, and we learned that he was immune to said bite and its effects. Sorry, Dracula. In the end, Wolverine came out on top, managing to later on decapitate Dracula. Obviously, he came back, but for the Prince of Darkness, King of Lies, Lord of the Undead, this was a pretty embarrassing defeat. Especially as he bit him and then he was like, yes, this didn't work, but that's fine. I'm sure it's taking all of your healing factor to fight off the vampirism. I don't know if it was actually taking all of his healing factor. He did look a little rough, but I feel like Wolverine was like, yeah, sure, bub, all of my healing factor.
Next on the list, we have Batman goes after his parents' killers. Joe Chill was always someone who was floating around comics as a symbol, just a ghost who was the motivation for Batman. That's until the writers brought him in and had Batman track him down. God, I wouldn't want to be the man who killed Batman's parents. Once Batman finally finds out where this dude lives, he starts to torment him psychologically for days, coming to his house over and over. Joe now can't sleep because he's terrified and starts to go a little crazy. It all caps off when Batman breaks in with a gun and tells Joe the reason that he's been doing this to him. And just so you know, Joe Chill ends up taking his own life to escape the torment. So Batman won't kill, but he will do everything around it to make you kill yourself. Next on the list, we have Charles brainwashes Magneto. Charles Xavier and Magneto have been clashing heads ever since the first issue of the X-Men. These two go toe-to-toe all the time, and until more recently, they have never been able to see eye to eye. One of them wants mutants and humans to live side by side in a world where everyone is peaceful and no one ever fights, and the other sees the human race as a threat that must be put under the boot of mutant kind. Well, eventually Xavier has had enough and decides that he's going to get his revenge on his old friend slash enemy. He goes inside Magneto's mind and he rearranges things so Magneto thinks he's actually a human social worker. I can't think of a punishment more humiliating for the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil. To go from someone who used to be one of the most powerful mutants in the world, someone who hated humans with every fiber of their being, to someone who had to ride the bus so they can help humans get their life back on track, and just to rub it in, Charles goes to visit him frequently while he's stuck in this state. And coming in at the #1 spot, we got V for Vendetta. Come on, how could this not be the #1 spot? The whole story is about revenge. You can't get any closer to the biggest revenge story in comics than this one right here. And Natalie Portman shaved her head for the role, and everyone lost their mind. Whoa, it was a big deal back then. But in this movie, you have V, who is a genetically enhanced ex-prisoner who was tortured by the government for years. In this dictatorship future, you have a fascist government that has taken control of everything, and anyone who steps out of line is taken in their sleep by the secret police and is never heard from again. The story ends with political leaders being killed, a revolution rising up to rewrite society, and the fall of the fascist government. The statement of revenge was so powerful in this story that the V for Vendetta mask became the symbol for the mysterious hacker group Anonymous. So I think being such an impactful story of revenge that the icons from that story impact real life, yeah, that's gonna get you the #1 spot on this list.
Number 10, General Coy and Prince Baran get spooked. Wrapping up the events involving Terra Verde's civil unrest and the face-off with Spore in issue number 23 of the original Wolverine series, Wolverine decided upon his return to Madripoor that it was time to give General Coy and Prince Baran a taste of their own medicine. While Prince Baran was a sometimes ally of Wolverine's, for this story he was more playing the role of sometimes villain or antagonist that he's also known for in the series. As such, in the middle of the night, Wolverine pays a visit to both men and kidnaps them. They awaken blindfolded in the sewers, where Wolverine explains the extent of what can happen if the vial of the drug that Coy chose to keep were unleashed on someone, how it would basically make them go insane. It could also potentially unleash a darker evil who was only just defeated, Spore. Really not cool for you to keep that vial, Coy. Coy and Baran fear that Wolverine has administered the drug to them, terrified. They discover, however, that this is not the case, and instead that the only threat in these sewers is an equally deadly and very angry Wolverine. Horrified, they run in fear and escape from the sewers, only to be laughed at by the people of Madripoor as they surface, covered in sewage. Hopefully they learn their lesson. Knowing General Coy though, probably not, because then he does a lot of other stuff. Number 9, unintentionally embarrassed Sabretooth. Sure, Wolverine is all for putting Victor in his place. Once he met the guy and knew how bad he was, that is. But before that, the Creeds were just a family that Wolverine kinda got tied up in. Logan ended up captured and in a circus being used as an attraction. Something about the X-Men and circuses, I tell you, it happens a lot. This was really a low point in Wolverine's life as he was suffering from severe depression after the death of Rose, and then following that, the death of his wolf pack by Nathaniel Essex's Bear, which was really upsetting because he'd taken a lot of solace in his pack. In the end, it was Clara Creed who managed to reach out to Logan, saving him both physically and emotionally. The two fell in love with one another quickly, but it didn't end well for either of them. Saul Creed, Clara's little brother, sold them out. Once this was revealed, Logan felt the only way to protect Clara was to get rid of Saul, permanently. Clara was ready to cut Saul out of her life, but didn't want to see him killed. Because Logan killed Saul, she rejected him. And because Logan killed Saul, Victor interpreted it as a slight, embarrassed that Logan had been the one to kill Saul, as Saul was Victor's to torment. Victor would visit Saul each year on his birthday to beat him up. So yeah, hence why Sabretooth visits Wolverine each year now instead, because he was like, how dare you do this to me? This is unacceptable. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear about more times that Wolverine kind of embarrassed his villains, intentionally and unintentionally, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, blew up Dracula. If you've been surprised by Dracula appearing as a Wolverine villain in his current 2020 series, don't be. These two actually have a lot of history, and the mutants themselves have also tangled with vampires in general in the past. Old Man Logan even faced Dracula before, when mutants were disappearing and he was on the trail of tracking down his good pal and one of his sidekicks back in the day, Jubilee. This time around, however, Dracula seems to be interested in harnessing Wolverine's blood for its healing properties, and using the blood to help all vampires walk in the daylight without danger of going up in flames and perishing. Wolverine, however, literally blew up Dracula's well-laid plans when he took part in a plan to turn his body into a bomb. Well, more a devoid of consciousness clone body. This body was then offered to Dracula by his less than faithful servant Omega Red, which means instead of walking in the daylight, much of Drax's following instead went up in smoke, as Wolverine's clone's blood was altered to be like liquid sunshine to the vamps, thick with photonic cells, and so he became a dirty bomb. Or well, his clone became a dirty bomb.
Coming at number 7, we have Molecule Man depowers Dr. Doom. When we jump into the Secret Wars comics, we see one of my favorite moments in Dr. Doom's history. I really like Doom, because even though he's one of the most evil dudes around, he has been right a few times. And when the universe was ripped apart, Dr. Doom teams up with Molecule Man to make a new battle world that sees him as the emperor of everything. I don't think that's how the heroes would want things to play out, but for a while, things are actually functioning really well. But here's the thing, this Doom and Molecule Man team up wasn't so much a team up as it was Doom using the hero for his powers and then rejecting him any sort of attention or food. Eventually, Molecule Man snaps and sucks Doom of all of his powers, and then the heroes are able to take him out and restore balance to the universe. Next on the list, we have Batman against the Mutant Leader. The Dark Knight Returns still stands as one of the best comic books ever, and for good reason. It's Rocky meets Batman. You have a Superman-Batman fight, and it all takes place in a rundown, even more dangerous future version of Gotham. In this comic, you have an aged Batman in his 50s, coming out of retirement to put the cape back on and deal out justice. But when it comes to his first encounter with a big baddie, it doesn't go as planned. He fights the Mutant Leader, who is the muscle mass leader of the most powerful gang in Gotham. Even though Batman is Batman, he's old and he's been out of the game for quite some time. So the Mutant Leader puts a beating on him that nearly leaves the Bat dead, if it wasn't for a new Robin coming in to save him. Batman is able to escape, but he doesn't forget that he has a score to settle. The next time these two face off will be in front of nearly the entire mutant gang. No gadgets, no weapons, just two men squaring off for control of the mutant gang and thus Gotham City. It's one of the best fights I've ever seen in comics, and it showcases Batman's tactical mind as the advantage over his bigger, stronger, younger opponent. Next on the list, we have Punisher kills Howard Saint. Now, even though the Punisher movie isn't the most loved Marvel movie of all time, when people badmouth the DC cinematic universe, everyone forgets that Marvel had to make Punisher, Spider-Man 3, and Ghost Rider before we ever got to Iron Man. And even after that, the Thor movies were pretty bunk until 3, and Iron Man 3 was also a wash. So give DC some time, I'm sure they'll figure it out, or they won't, I don't know. But back to my point, in the Punisher movie, we have Frank Castle hunting down Howard Saint, the man who killed his family and turned him into the anti-hero that we have all come to love. And when Frank Castle finally gets his way back to the mob boss's house, who's played by John Travolta, he gets his revenge big time. He kills the dude's whole family, and then he has him dragged by a car through a series of explosions that eventually lights him on fire. I never took the Punisher for someone who liked theatrics, but apparently that's what he's all about. After that, guys, we have Marv feeds Kevin to wolves. This one is a bit of a shift from the other comics we've been covering so far. Sin City is a wild comic turned into a movie that is very gruesome, but it is awesome and kept me watching even though the whole thing was in black and white. To keep your viewer into the movie while the whole thing has no color, in this day and age, that is very impressive. Well, in one storyline, we have Marv, who is the toughest brute who can't be killed. He wakes up next to a dead lady. Very unfortunate. He then is framed for her murder. Even more unfortunate. But he's got a soft spot for the lady who was killed, so he goes on a revenge quest to find her killer. Turns out it was an insane serial killer named Kevin who eats them and keeps their heads in jars. Yeah, I'm not making this up. So to even the score, Marv cuts off Kevin's arms and legs and has him eaten by wolves. And Marv later learns that the Pope was the one sending out Kevin to do these dirty deeds, and he kills the Pope. Yeah, it really escalates.
I don't know why and I don't know how I never even met you before tonight, but you were a friend and more when I needed one.
Number 3, Omega Red versus the Wolverines. You mess with the Wolverine, you get a bunch of them that you have to deal with. You get all the Wolverines. As was evident when Omega Red came to Krakoa seeking to claim what his mutant given right was, to take refuge on the new mutant island nation. And, you know, not be condemned or anything, even though he did bad stuff in the past. However, not everyone was able to forgive and forget when it came to his past, namely Wolverine. Still suspicious of Omega Red, once it seemed as though he'd seen him appear outside of Krakoa and kind of to trap him in ice, Wolverine was ready to confront him, already having an uneasy feeling about his former nemesis since pretty much day one. However, when Wolverine explained what had happened to him to his family, they weren't ready to let him go in alone. He was joined by Daken and Gabby, who both showed Omega Red how easy it was to sneak up on him and get him in a trap. In the end, the discussion had to be tabled, but it was pretty fun to see the look on his face when the Wolverine family came together to attack him. If you were wondering where Laura was, by the way, she'd likely still be in the vault at this time, as per her adventures in the 2019 X-Men series, which is why she wasn't there. Otherwise, I'm sure Laura would also be there. Number 2, found the perfect match for Solemn. After it was revealed that Solemn had taken Logan's Muramasa blade and ended up giving one such blade to the Iraqi pirate, Severe, during Solemn's escape from him, Wolverine tracked Solemn down. He confronted Solemn and was convinced to take on Sever with him together. Later, Solemn bailed on this confrontation in typical Solemn fashion, it seems. However, Wolverine had a few tricks up his sleeve. Realizing that he and Solemn were fairly even matched, he decided to call in some reinforcements. Wolverine went to the White Queen, Emma Frost, and had her join him in their confrontation of Solemn, which she was happy to do as she had her own score to settle with him. They pursued Solemn to the sliver of remaining Araco Island on Earth where he was hiding out. And let's just say that while Wolverine and Solemn could likely fight against one another all day to only really reach a stalemate, Emma was out of Solemn's league. She interrogated him, much to his dismay and embarrassment, because Emma of course can easily access almost anyone's hidden dirty secrets and desires, no matter how dirty and secret and hidden they are. So now she knows everything about Solemn, whether she wanted to or not. Number 1, Ultimate Family Jewels. Oh boy. Of course, a lot of embarrassing moments would come from the Ultimate Universe, wouldn't they? This one hails from issue number 12 of the Ultimate X-Men series. Here, Ultimate Wolverine and Ultimate Sabretooth face off, only for Wolverine to completely embarrass Victor in this fight. As Sabretooth holds Wolverine beneath the water, making him suffocate and killing his brain cells, Wolverine counterattacks by going for his, family jewels, as he calls them. His retort to Sabretooth mocking how he'll never be considered a brainiac now turns to tears and pain as Wolverine responds that at least he's smart enough to cover his family jewels in a fight before he tackles Sabretooth off a cliff. Wow, what a way to finish a fight.
Number 10. The Joker beats Jason Todd. A Death in the Family is a 4-part storyline written by Jim Starlin and published in 1988. This was a huge moment in the Bat story because we see the Joker break out of Arkham Asylum and of course kills 8 people in the process. So Batman says himself that everybody is going to want a piece of the Joker after what he did to Barbara. He beat the second coming of Robin, Jason Todd, to death. So he beat him with a crowbar and then a bomb ended it all, supposedly. Like the Joker used Jason's mother, he blackmailed her and then used her just to get closer to Jason. That's crazy. And then of course he killed her off too, because why not? What's even crazier about this whole thing is that it was up to the fans to decide this fate. Yeah, there was a 36-hour period where you can call in and vote if you wanted the Joker to kill Robin or not. That's like the weirdest reality game show ever, I think. So dialing one number meant death, and then dialing another meant that he survives. And it got really close too. I think it was like almost 50-50 when it came to the votes. One caller actually admitted to dialing the number numerous times, which is what I would have done. I'm surprised only one person did that. Or at least one person admitted to that, more accurately. Sometimes Joker's plans to strike the Bat don't work out, and sometimes we are the sole reason he gets that brutal payback after breaking out. So it's our fault. Also, before we get to number 9, we have a huge announcement. Our brand new gaming channel, Viper Girl, premieres January 22nd. Viper Girl will be streaming everything, your favorite sandbox, open games, your favorite horror games, anything you name it. It's gonna be a blast. January 22nd, you don't wanna miss. So get over there and subscribe as soon as you're done with this video, because it's gonna be a blast.
Oh my gosh, I almost died. I almost died. I thought you were a cactus, my friend. I thought you were a cactus. We've got iron, baby. Yes. Okay, my main goal is to blow up and then act like I don't know nobody. Bro, no, I'm gonna fight you with a pork chop. No, come here. This is awesome.
Number 9, Kraven's Last Hunt. We take a look now at Kraven's Last Hunt, published in 1987, and it has quite an interesting illustration on the front cover. Here Lies Spider-Man. Whoa, okay, so what's going on here? Okay, so this 5-part series starts off with Kraven being frustrated after his many failed attempts to catch Spider-Man. So he comes up with this brand new tactic to get back at the web-slinger. So he talks about for years how Spider-Man has thwarted him, mocked him, and humiliated him. And what better way to get back at somebody than by, well, burying them. And even worse, he takes Spider-Man's suit and replaces him out in the real world. So not only do you get defeated, but you also get replaced, adding insult to injury, literally. So then this new Spider-Man, well, our boy Kraven, now he roams New York City and brutally attacks criminals, including a group that was harassing Mary Jane. So 2 weeks later, Pete wakes up from the effects of the tranquilizer Kraven used, and then he digs himself out to freedom, which is, I mean, what a weird wake up that must be. And then when he confronted Kraven about what's going on, Kraven gets defensive. He's like, no way, Pete, I'm the real deal. I'm doing the Spider-Man gig now, not you. Get out of here. Wow, talk about taking an L, Pete. Jeez. Number 8, Harley Quinn fights back. They became the king and queen of Gotham City. They're basically the worst couple ever. I mean, I'm glad we're seeing more of Harley on the big screen now without the Joker. Harley Quinn has always been known for flipping back and forth, changing sides. But in the comics, her relationship with the Joker is abusive and controlling. And Harley Quinn Volume 2, Issue 25, she does something she should have done a long time ago and proceeds to give the Joker a ultimate beatdown, even biting a piece of his lip off during the scrap. Ah, sweet bloody revenge. Love to see it.
At number 7, we have the time when Iron Man escapes the black hole created when Godkiller self-destructs. What's embarrassing about this event is that Godkiller's intentions are to take Iron Man with it in the blast created by its own self-destruction. And it's very sure that it'll accomplish this task, considering Iron Man is aboard it. Godkiller is basically a giant suit of armor, and Iron Man is in it. That's strangely hard to explain, but I think you know what I mean. And I don't blame Godkiller for having high expectations for this final feat, considering the black hole it ends up creating is the size of Earth, meaning that it would have 24 times the mass of the sun. So that means that the only thing Godkiller miscalculates, much like everyone else on this list, is Iron Man's strength, speed, and durability. And yeah, Iron Man comes flying out of the black hole, escaping the close call with his life completely intact. And that means that Godkiller obliterates himself basically for nothing, allowing Iron Man to escape to safety, despite the pull of 24 suns on his back. Godkiller gets absolutely owned here, but at least he's not alone. He's got the other 9 villains on this list to talk it out with. At number 6 is the time when Iron Man unhinges a plan set by the Raxon Corporation when they detonate a deposit of vibranium to try and destroy a fleet of battleships. Basically, going back, it starts with a battle between Iron Man and Namor, which is interrupted by the realization that Raxon is trying to gain control of a whole island due to a deposit of the highly valuable metal vibranium mentioned earlier. When a group of battleships close in to prevent this from taking place, the corrupt corporation decides to detonate the vibranium so that no one can have it. And it seems to be part of the plan to destroy these battleships in the process. But what does Iron Man do? He decides he wants to control the narrative and physically tows the 5 battleships away from the explosion. This makes it so Raxon just destroys the vibranium for no reason. And Iron Man does this with one of his old armors too. He can't help but show everyone that he has the strength to change everyone's plan at any given time and leave them in the dust wondering what happened. Okay, at number 4 is the time when Iron Man fractures the Phoenix Force with his Phoenix Buster armor. Now, I'm not sure if the Phoenix Force can physically feel anything, let alone embarrassment, considering it's a cosmic entity powerful enough to shatter whole worlds like glass, but if it could, its face would be red and hot after Iron Man absolutely wrecks Phoenix Force, forcing it to split up into 5 pieces. And the Phoenix Force isn't the only one who should be feeling the burn from this huge win by Iron Man. Thor even fails to take down Phoenix Force with his hammer right before Tony succeeds at it. So Iron Man is just showing everyone up in this event. And this is a huge event that had been building up for a while. Phoenix Force had been posing a huge threat to the X-Men and the Avengers in this storyline. So Iron Man just showing up and blowing it up into a bunch of pieces is pretty humiliating for such a powerful being. I just like to picture Phoenix Force getting all geared up about taking out all these superheroes and then their plans having to change entirely after a little human in his own little armor appears to stop them in their tracks. It's just, yikes, wrecked.
Number 3, Bane breaks the bat. Bane was born to serve the life sentence of his father. He spent his childhood locked away at Peno Duro prison in Santa Prisca, and his mother was locked up with him, but she died when he was only 6 years old. He would have these dreams about this demonic bat while he was serving time. So when he busted out of prison with Trog, Zombie, and Bird, his new plan was to take down the Batman, who he had heard tales of. Plus the dreams, he kind of pinned this whole horrible upbringing on Batman himself, which makes sense. So in Batman issue 497, we see Bane dish out one of the worst paybacks ever. A broken back. Number 2, Baron Helmut Zemo. Making his first appearance as Phoenix in Captain America issue 168, he's the son of Baron Heinrich Zemo, who was the master scientist and enemy of Captain America during World War II. Until he was killed by Cap, of course. So he grew up wanting to get back at the man responsible, Captain America. Even after the death of Steve Rogers following Civil War, Zemo still wanted to take down Bucky, who had stepped up to take over as new Cap. So Zemo revealed all of the Winter Soldier's dirty past to the media, which I really hope is the main plot for the new Falcon and Winter Soldier show, because that would be amazing. And it would make sense. And number 1, Ultimate Spider-Man's death. Peter shows up a lot on this list, which makes sense. Maybe it's because he's constantly talking shit while he locks up all of his enemies, makes it easier for them to dish out that sweet revenge once they inevitably break out. Ultimate Spider-Man's death is so exhausting and saddening. So after tackling Captain America and literally taking a bullet for him, Peter heads home to find that Electro, Sandman, Vulture, and Kraven are there waiting for him. They all wanted a piece of the spider, and in the end they got what they wanted. Peter tried his hardest, but this was the last of Ultimate Spider-Man. Miles witnessed this last act of bravery, and it actually inspired him to take on the mantle afterwards. So the villains may have won this time, but don't worry, because Miles is going to be waiting for you as soon as you're done.
At number 10, it is the time when Iron Man almost kills a non-Cyttorak powered Juggernaut. In this exchange, Juggernaut is on a tear, and Thor, Ghost, Luke Cage, and Iron Man appear to try and put a stop to him. Iron Man warns Juggernaut with total confidence to stand down because the numbers are against him. Juggernaut then basically hits L2 and activates his taunt, saying, "Then it's almost even." Should not have said that. So instead of humoring any more of this back and forth, Iron Man promptly follows through with his threat and blasts Juggernaut, almost killing him. The blast he hits him with is a sonic beam that he's used before to put down a whole regiment. The attack injures Juggernaut so badly that he's basically like steaming and bleeding from every orifice on his face. It's so bad that Luke Cage has to stop Iron Man before he kills the Juggernaut there and then. And it's pretty clear that Juggernaut had no idea that Iron Man would dominate the battle this much. And it becomes one of the many moments where Iron Man is able to come through and show everyone that he's not only one of the most powerful in the room, but that he's also willing to follow through. Okay, at number 9, we have the time when Iron Man is called to free hostages from an enclosure made of adamantium and vibranium, two of the strongest materials in the known universe. Remember, adamantium is the metal that reinforces Wolverine's skeleton and what his claws are made of, and vibranium is what Black Panther's weapons are made of, which can absorb and amplify sonic energy. So when Cardiac traps his hostages in a massive enclosure made of these materials, he clearly doesn't believe that there's any chance anyone could thwart his plans. But when Iron Man arrives on scene, he promptly backs himself up and basically turns his body into a human missile, rocketing towards the enclosure and busting a huge hole in it with his fist. This allows oxygen to enter the chamber, giving the team much more time to eventually save the hostages entirely. He does break his arm and a few ribs, but once again, he takes a villain's confidence and absolutely shatters it with his supreme power and iron will. At number 8, we have an event that is counted widely as one of Iron Man's most powerful feats. Mandarin and Iron Man find themselves facing off against a common enemy, an army of dragons led by Fin Fang Foom and Chen Su. And the dragons seem to be winning. After some pretty close calls, Iron Man and Mandarin seem to be at a stalemate, realizing that the dragons are just not letting up. At this very moment, Chen Su morphs back into dragon form and makes a final appeal to Mandarin for the rings, citing their power and how he is ill-equipped to control them himself. Iron Man realizes that this may be true, but that he is much more than a man, so he could himself unleash the true power of the rings, and he does. He grabs Mandarin's hands and unleashes an enormous explosion that levels a few mountain ranges as well as Fin Fang Foom and Chen Su in one go. This is another moment where a major enemy underestimates Iron Man's superhuman abilities and pays the price for it.
Number 7, Mysterio. Quentin Beck made his first Marvel Comics appearance in Amazing Spider-Man issue 13 back in 1963, and he serves as an enemy to Deadpool, Daredevil, and of course, Spider-Man. He started off as a special effects artist and stuntman, but his career wasn't too hot, so he decided to put his skills to work and don this super identity, and he went to the Daily Bugle and announced that he would take down this hated Spider-Man, which of course J. Jonah Jameson was super on board with. So they battle it out, Mysterio wins, he finally gets that glory that he deserves. But of course Spider-Man couldn't have that, so he surprised Mysterio, and in typical actor fashion, he monologued his entire plan of disguising himself as Spider-Man, but Peter was prepared with a tape recorder. And Spider-Man was known as the guy who caught Mysterio. This all resulted in Mysterio seeking revenge for the rest of his life, and in The Amazing Spider-Man 196, he fakes Aunt May's death. So, while it's one thing to catch a villain early in his acts, you might kind of be the sole reason they're after you for the rest of their life. Number 6, Jack Frost. So while Mysterio in the MCU is a past employee of Stark Industries, the comics also showcase villains with similar origin stories, like Jack Frost, who was introduced in 1959's Tale of Suspense, issue 45. He was fired from Stark Industries, so he figured he would use the knowledge of Chironics to get back at Stark, deeming it a fitting revenge that he's dreamt up for him, turning him into a hunk of cold steel, that is. But on the way to settle the score with Tony Stark, he froze people on the street. Yeah, the guy went straight Frozone on his way there. So if you were on your way to work that day, you had no chance. So if you're gonna fire an employee who's also a tech whiz, you might want to check their bag on the way out the door. Number 5, Victor Von Doom. Making his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 5, he's one of the most popular Marvel villains ever. He's a genius who thinks he would do a good job ruling the world, and he actually becomes the ruler of the land Latveria. So why the taste for ruling? Where did this all come from? Well, his mother, a Latvian woman, was connected with demons before Victor was even born. And well, after he was born, she attempted to tap into the demonic powers herself, but unfortunately she died during a bargain with Mephisto. So him and his dad made a break for it, but sadly his dad froze to death while protecting him one night. And then in hopes to bring back his mother, he used his big brain and turned to science and magic. So he attended classes with Reed Richards and Ben Grimm, and they didn't like each other. See, Reed pranked him, he changed his name to Doof instead of Doom on a trophy. So Victor Von Doof, which is not a bad idea. So when Doom started developing a machine that could astral project a being into another dimension in hopes to save his mother, Reed was like, hey, your calculations here are a little bit wrong. But he was annoyed because he was a bully, so he ignored his warnings. He ignored him, thinking he was being a doof himself. And then the machine blew up, messed his face up pretty well, and after being expelled for said experiment, he returned back to Latveria after getting a fancy new suit to become the new king. So he blamed Reed for his face and expulsion and explosion, and he vowed from that moment on to use his power to take down Reed and the Fantastic Four. And he succeeds quite a bit. Be nice to classmates, folks. I don't know, there might just be a king one day. Haven't we seen Shrek 4? Number 4, Black Mask. Making his first appearance in Batman issue 386, deadlier than Ra's al Ghul, crazier than the Joker. That's quite the pitch. So who is this guy? Who is Roman Sionis? Well, he was neglected as a young boy by his parents, not to mention the second he was born, he was dropped on his head. His parents were the annoying rich type, and he wasn't a fan of that lifestyle. They cared more about the glam than they did their own son. It's quite sad. They were always phony, so he grew to obsess over masks. Makes sense. He grew up and became the vice president of his father's company, Janus Cosmetics. But he wanted total control of his family's empire, so he burned down his family home with his parents still inside. So all that wealth now belonged to him, which is super dark. So his parents used masks to gain their fortune, while he used their fortune to collect exotic masks from around the world. Crazy how life works.
Which brings us to number 3, when Iron Man totally humiliates this fleet of guys wearing power suits that they think could combat his own. With their suits having the same firepower as some small countries, they expect there's no way Tony Stark could match up against them. In fact, Tony is even wearing his classic armor, which isn't quite as powerful as his updated suit, so they even have a better chance than usual to even the score. And still, they're made to look like fools, as Iron Man easily evades their heat-seeking missiles and diverts them to actually backfire and destroy the armored assailants themselves. It's just an absolute joke watching him face off against these guys, carrying them around like they're action figures and throwing insults at them, and they seem so confident. That's what kills me about this list, is how confident all these villains are before Iron Man shows them who's boss. It just makes the wins all more embarrassing when they come. Okay, nearing the top of our list at number 2, we have the iconic face-off between Iron Man and Captain America. During the Civil War conflict, the Avengers are split into 2 different factions, one side being led by Captain America, the other by Iron Man. And as tensions escalate on either side, it finally culminates to a big battle between the 2 sides, and of course between Iron Man and Captain America themselves. But like everyone else on this list, Captain America somehow underestimates Tony Stark when he tries to pull a fast one on him and disable his armor. After what seems like a conciliatory handshake between Iron Man and Captain America, Tony notices a small electron scrambler device on his hand, leaving him open to a blow by Cap's shield right to the face. But as Iron Man is laying on the ground, petrified, he simply reboots his armor and gets back up. I don't think Captain America expects this either, because Iron Man flies at him and after an effortless fist fight, knocks him to the ground, almost severing his jaw with one massive punch in the face. This is high up on the list because Captain America is a very skilled strategist, and watching him get shown up so hard like this has to be pretty humiliating, especially in front of all his peers like that. Oof. At number 1, it is the face-off that Iron Man has against Magneto during the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. This event takes the top of the list because of the irony. Get it? Iron-y? The irony of this particular face-off, given that Magneto manipulates metal and Iron Man is made of it. Fans had been anticipating this face-off for some time, so when it came, everyone expected Magneto to take the W. And that includes Magneto himself. But in classic ingenious Iron Man fashion, Tony Stark shows up to the fight with a special non-metal armor made out of nanotubes, stealing this huge advantage from Magneto. But that's not where it ends. Iron Man then harnesses the power of Jupiter's magnetic field to power up his armor and take down the magnetic supervillain. And while Magneto is coming back for one final attempt, he's distracted by Phoenix Force, giving Iron Man the chance to knock him out properly this time. This is a huge embarrassment for Magneto since he's the obvious choice for this battle. It might take some time to recover from that one, and I'm not just talking about his physical wounds.
And at 10, Superman. The Dark Multiverse is a mysterious dimension. It lies outside of the normal universe. In one of the many universes in the Dark Dimension, Superman went rogue and killed off every hero and villain. No one could actually stop him. The last remaining hero was of course Batman, who could not even believe that his best friend could have done all this. But Batman had a plan. Fail-safe. Surprise. He had studied Doomsday's body and created a virus that could turn himself into a version. Batman then became Doomsday, killed Superman, and then decided to spread this virus all over the earth, turning everyone into a form of Doomsday, which not only humiliates Superman but also kind of embarrasses Batman himself. I mean, like, he probably went nuts because of the whole like he was part Doomsday thing, but still. And at 9, Calabac. Batman had gone toe-to-toe with the New Gods on 2 occasions prior to the New 52, in Comic Odyssey and Final Crisis respectively, but this time he came with a vengeance. In the wake of Damian Wayne's death in the finale of Batman Inc., Bruce happens upon Ra's al Ghul's attempt to resurrect his son in a Lazarus pit, along with his former lover Talia. He prevents the head of the demon from bringing them back to life, as they would emerge as Raz's servants. But before they can actually stop Damian's body from being resurrected, his body gets snatched, and his dead son is ripped from Batman's grasp. And then this guy heads back to Apokolips. This leads Batman to deploy the Hellbat armor and venture all the way to Apokolips to retrieve his son, and in the process ends up fighting Darkseid and Calabac, the Lord of Apocalypse's faithful son. And at 8, White Martians. Grant Morrison's Justice League run features the world falling under attack from the villainous White Martians, and it's up to the Justice League, obviously, to stop them. Also, like in the cartoons version of this story, the decisive blow is finally dealt by Batman, who is so badly underestimated by the White Martians because he lacks the superpowers of his fellow teammates. The White Martians managed to capture all of the Justice League and assumed that Batman was killed when they shot down the Batwing. However, the Dark Knight had survived the wreckage because of his plot armor and deduced that they were just as susceptible to fire as Martian Manhunter, due to the fact that they didn't come near his burning plane. Batman swoops in, sets everything on fire like a pointy-eared Human Torch, and saves his teammates. Another lesson in why you should never underestimate him, which reminds me of when Oliver Queen shot all the Dominators with their own gun in the Invasion crossover on the CW after escaping Dreamworld, which is still one of my favorite Arrow episodes.
Coming in at number 7, we have the Ultimate Hulk literally eating Herr Kaiser. As one of the first major enemies faced by the Ultimate Superhero Team, Kaiser was a Chitauri warrior that had infiltrated Earth during the Second World War and was able to fight toe-to-toe with both Nick Fury and the Super Serum enhanced Captain America. As a last-ditch effort to defeat the villain, the Ultimates unleashed the Hulk to defeat their shape-shifting foe, who decided to ensure Kaiser could never return by eating his corpse and then destroying the feces that resulted from the meal. There's overkill, and then there's being overkilled by the Hulk. Coming in at number 6, we have the Ultimate Hulk versus Ultimate Abomination. In another example example of the Ultimate Hulk being vicious as hell, the Abomination was an attempt to recreate the conditions that had made the Hulk, but hoping to improve the process and allow him to be controlled. The Abomination had all of the Hulk's strength, but retained all of his human brain power after the transformation, which was intended to help the Abomination permanently put down the Hulk, but still led to Abomination being absolutely torn to shreds, with the Hulk adding salt to the wound by claiming, "You think too much," a final backhanded insult to show that being smarter isn't always going to lead to better outcomes. Coming in at number 5, we have the original Marvel Universe's Hulk vs. Abomination, which somehow manages to be even more of a complete victory than the Ultimate versions. After Abomination was blamed for the death of Bruce Banner's wife, Betty Ross, the Hulk went on a complete rampage to destroy Abomination, something the villain intended to finally figure out which of the two green giants was stronger. But in a final humiliating moment, the Hulk had the opportunity to finally kill Abomination, but instead chose to revert back to Bruce Banner, showing his humanity and proving to Abomination that Banner had the strongest willpower of all, the ultimate defeat for Abomination. Coming in at number 4, we have Hulk smashing Loki in the original MCU Avengers film. For years, comic book fans had been yearning to see a proper adaptation of the Jade Giant on screen. And while earlier live-action Hulk films were ambitious in their own ways and had their own unique moments, the most iconic and defining Hulk moment finally came when the Hulk joined the Avengers in their first team-up movie and interrupted Loki's monologuing to give him the beatdown he deserved. This was the Hulk we'd all been waiting to see, and hearing Cap tell him to smash, or the Hulk saying puny god, they were definitely worth the wait.
Getting close to the end at number 3, the Riddler. Batman Universe is an absolute gem of a comic. The series spotlights Batman in a time-traveling, universe-spanning adventure that takes him all the way from present-day Gotham to Thanagar, then back in time to the Wild West where he meets Jonah Hex, and then all the way back to the present again. This series starts off somewhat innocuously, however. It's kinda simple, with a confrontation with the Riddler. Only Batman can tell that something isn't quite right. The Riddler's riddle this time was simply, when is the Riddler not the Riddler? And both the Dark Knight and Alfred agree that this is way below Nigma's usual standard. After chasing Riddler down and asking why he's stolen a priceless Fabergé egg, Batman also expresses concern at Nigma's behavior. It comes off as sincere concern, but there's an element of condescension in there as well about how Riddler just isn't riddling like he used to, and honestly, he's trash at the moment, basically. And it's even more obvious that this is kind of Batman's tone when Green Arrow shows up and Batman literally says, "You're embarrassing yourself in front of Green Arrow. Are you feeling alright?" Which is kind of a dig at both Nigma and Oliver. Penultimately, in at number 2, the Justice League. The Justice Buster Batsuit is a mech suit part of Batman's Fenrir contingency, designed to take down the entirety of the Justice League, making its feature appearance in Batman Endgame when the Joker used his virus to warp the brains of the Justice League as the beginning of his Endgame plot. Batman was forced to use the Fenrir protocol to eliminate his teammates. The suit was successful in eliminating Wonder Woman, the Flash, and Aquaman, but met an even match at the hands of Superman. After a lengthy fight, Superman tore through the armor and nearly killed Batman until Bruce used kryptonite chewing gum and spit it in Clark's face, rendering him unconscious. Come on! Like, imagine waking up to learn that you passed out because Batman spit on your face. Like, seriously bro, please, brush your tongue when you brush your teeth. Your breath is absolutely lethal. Not to mention the miniaturized red suns for Knuckles, ancient Greek supernatural weaponry, super fast servers, and electromagnetic nerve trees for a sensor array that are also in the suit. And finally, in at number 1, the Joker. Mad Love is one of the most beloved episodes of Batman the Animated Series, but the story of the episode was first told in the show's tie-in comic, The Batman Adventures. The story provides an in-depth look into Harley Quinn's origin and the full extent of her abusive relationship with the Joker. After her anniversary plans end with her being thrown out of a window by Mr. J, she decides that the only way to win her Puddin's affection is to capture and kill Batman. And she succeeds, well, at capturing. But Joker isn't happy about that. If anyone's gonna take Batman down, it's going to be him. And he lashes out at Harley once again, leaving him alone with the Dark Knight. Batman and Joker then fight, obviously, but Batman's able to use Harley's successful scheme to his advantage, taunting the Joker that she came closer than he ever has to actually killing him, and concluding this joke by calling him pudding, which is one of the funniest things I think Batman has ever done. Being usually a brooding and dark hero who still refuses to kill despite his darkness, calling his greatest enemy by his girlfriend's pet name is one of the best moments for Batman ever.
At number 10, we have the time when the Flash accidentally kills Reverse Flash by breaking his neck. This incident takes place in the Flash number 79 when Reverse Flash seems to be back to mess with Barry Allen's life again. Their beef starts when Reverse Flash kills the love of Barry's life, Iris West, and sends the Flash into a depression, naturally. But when Barry finally moves on and is set to marry Fiona Webb, Reverse Flash shows up again and tries to kill his new fiancée. So what does Barry Allen do? He swoops in and grabs Reverse Flash in a chokehold while he's in motion, thus snapping his neck and killing him right there and then. Which is pretty embarrassing considering Barry basically just uses Reverse Flash's own momentum to kill him. But following this event, the whole city catches wind of what happens and actually turns on Barry for some reason. I do not understand this. Reverse Flash kept showing up to kill his wives. At a certain point, you have to take that guy out for good. They even put him on trial and convict him, causing the Flash to pack up and move to a different reality, which is like the superhero equivalent of moving to a new town, I guess. Number 9 is a fun one. This one is about Kid Flash and the time that he actually throws none other than Superboy Prime for a loop by running around him in a flurry and even landing a few punches on him. What makes this super embarrassing is that Superboy Prime is trying to have a serious revelation about where the Flash has gone and what Kid Flash is doing in his place. There's been some kind of break in the timeline at this point, and Superboy Prime thinks that the Flash has been killed. And as this epic realization moment is supposed to be happening, Kid Flash is ducking and dodging around Superboy's blasts and just being straight up goofy about the whole situation. So not only does the Flash seem to cheat death here, but his youthful replacement is just absolutely toying with this hyper powerful villain and not even breaking a sweat. This moment serves a helpful purpose as well because the rest of the team is able to focus on their objectives while Superboy Prime is distracted. And on top of everything, Kid Flash ends up having a full-on reunion with his friend, totally ignoring Superboy Prime. This isn't something such a powerful villain is used to, being taken for a fool like this. I just feel like it belongs on the list. At number 8 is a pretty cruel one. In the Flash number 200, Wally West basically forces Zoom to relive the most traumatic day of his life on a loop for eternity. But once again, this is the result of Zoom attacking his wife Linda and effectively ending the life of the baby in her womb. Okay, what's the deal with everyone going after the Flash's wives? Honestly, this is a pretty hardcore punishment for Zoom and might even go further than embarrassment in its effect, but he sort of had it coming. I mean, if Wally wanted to, he could have probably just killed him once he caught him, but instead he decides he's gonna let the guy think about what he's done for the rest of eternity while living out the worst thing he's ever experienced. A villain like Zoom isn't used to facing punishment like this very often, but trying to take things as far as he did does have its consequences, even at the hands of an otherwise kind and forgiving superhero like the Flash. Don't mess with the fam, people, come on. He's the fastest dude in the cosmos.
And at 7th, Cersei. Amazon's Attack was a short crossover that released in the build-up to Final Crisis. The comic saw Cersei manipulate the Amazons into invading the United States, believing that Wonder Woman had been detained by the Department of Metahuman Affairs, which wouldn't really make sense given that she's an Amazon and not a metahuman, but anyway. The Justice League was sent in response, or chose to go on their own at least, and wouldn't you guess it, Batman is right in the front lines. The Amazon Attacks crossover sees the Sorceress underestimate Batman and suffer embarrassment as a result. Batman enlists the help of Zatanna to defeat Cersei, and the League's preeminent magician casts a spell on the Wonder Woman adversary that renders her powerless for a short period of time, allowing for the Dark Knight to get the drop on her and lay the groundwork for Wonder Woman to swoop in and deliver the final blow. And at 6, Deathstroke. When it comes to comics, Batman and Deathstroke have faced off with each other on many occasions, with no definitive results going one way or the other. One of the most recent battles in the aptly titled Batman vs. Deathstroke comic saw the two fight into a stalemate. It's a fitting conclusion with a duel between the world's greatest detective and the world's deadliest assassin. Bats and Deathstroke then fought each other on top of a cable car dangling over Gotham Harbor. And just as when it seems as though Slade has gotten the upper hand, the Cape Crusader is able to ensnare him with his grapple gun and save the hostage position nearby, at least in the short-lived Beware the Batman animated series, which was released for one season in 2013. Deathstroke may be one of the deadliest figures in the DC universe, but that didn't stop Batman from giving this Terminator reject his just desserts. Halfway through in number 5, Darkseid. Bruce Wayne was at first not really taken seriously by Darkseid. As a matter of fact, Batman uses the element of being underestimated as like his greatest superpower basically. Batman doesn't kill, but he was forced to kill when Darkseid threatened Earth. The only known substance that could kill a new god is radion, so Batman shot Darkseid with a radion bullet and caused himself to die in the process. Darkseid, for that matter, had Batman as the last person in mind that could actually stop him. He thought if anybody was going to kill him, it would be Clark Kent, so yeah. Up until this point, the only human or sentient being, for that matter, that has truly made Darkseid, the god of evil in the DC universe, cower and run away is Batman. In it for Reverse Flash. A pride point for basically all speedsters, especially evil speedsters, is how fast they can move, how they're faster than a speeding bullet, and how they're basically impossible to hit. So imagine our surprise when Reverse Flash ends up getting popped in the head by none other than Thomas Wayne in the Flashpoint timeline, so that Barry Allen could access enough speed force to save the world and bring his son back. And while this apparently killed Thawne, that was far from it. Thawne actually started vibrating as fast as he could to slow the destruction of his brain. This actually gave Thawne more time to try and avoid death, or to try and find a way to do so, and gave him the ability to hold quite the grudge. Humiliated by getting killed by Batman of all people, Thawne sets out to be even worse than usual, even ripping up the letter that Thomas Wayne gave to Barry to give to Bruce. The only contact that Bruce has had with his parents since they died. The only contact with a living version, which is absolutely brutal. Batman was like ugly crying and ooh, it was not pretty.
Alright, at number 3 we have the time when the Flash turns Inertia into a living statue and then puts him in a museum. This is a pretty brutal punishment once again, and definitely something Inertia is not expecting. I mean, who thinks they're going to be overpowered on this level? After Kid Flash grows up, he takes over the moniker of Scarlet Speedster, filling in the role of the Flash while the mantle is basically unclaimed at the time. But he's eventually killed by Inertia, which is a pretty sad outcome for Kid Flash. And when Wally West returns as the Flash, he hunts down Inertia and confronts him about this incident. But Inertia doesn't seem sorry at all. And this is when Wally West goes beast mode and freezes Inertia as a sentient statue and puts him in the Flash Museum. And remember, Inertia is still alive in there, taking everything in and very aware that they're probably going to be stuck as a statue forever. Visitors will come by and look at Inertia as part of a villain's exhibit, read the little plaque about him, go, oh interesting, look, one point this guy was a pretty powerful villain, look, his Latin name is Inerticus Godondicus. And he'll never be able to wreak havoc ever again. How humiliating. And honestly, sort of fair, all things considered. Okay, at number 2, we have the time that the Flash actually runs himself back to life. This is a feat that absolutely astounds Black Racer, who is basically a conduit of death, chasing the Flash to snuff him out for good. But the Flash runs into an issue, in that he will eventually run out of stamina if he keeps running for his life. So, what he decides to do is run so far into the future that he reaches the end of the universe. And what happens when they reach the end of the universe? Well, Black Racer can't go on any further, of course. And he sure doesn't expect this. Although I don't know why anyone could expect it, because if Black Racer can't go beyond the end of the universe, why can Barry? This question is hotly contested online and basically comes down to the explanation that Barry reaches the end of the universe before Black Racer can, basically causing death to cease to exist. So he doesn't just humiliate Black Racer, he humiliates Death, its creator. Death needed to create Black Racer, so Speedster couldn't outrun Death anymore, and for the Flash to simply thwart that plan by doing something as risky and badass as running to the end of the universe, it's just crazy. And it belongs on the list. Finally, at number 1 is the time when the Flash single-handedly destroys Anti-Monitor's antimatter machine. Although he knows it'll mean his death, the Flash takes on a machine that will otherwise kill everyone he's ever loved, and let Anti-Monitor take his final victory over humanity. So he does what he does best and runs really fast, encircling the machine and breaking apart its outer casing, blowing up some henchmen in the process. This basically renders the machine useless, and Anti-Monitor knows it. He doesn't even hide his panic either, as he screams out that the Flash is behind all this and that his whole plan is foiled. Such a huge enemy like Anti-Monitor getting taken out by one single tiny superhero is a pretty embarrassing situation, and it sort of proves that Anti-Monitor is totally underestimating the Flash and humanity itself. I mean, he even says it himself, 1,000 universes and more have died because of me. Yet those humans have thwarted my plans, and more than once. Then he flips out. I don't think this is a regular occurrence for such a powerful evil force, and it's all because of the selflessness and bravery of the Flash, letting himself die just to show up the Anti-Monitor one last time. I'm just picturing Anti-Monitor sitting at his desk reworking his plans after this goes down like, ah man, okay, antimatter machine, no go, tried that, but failed. Man, maybe I've just lost my touch. Maybe I should find a nice universe where I can retire. Maybe I should just relax for a bit. How was that Anti-Monitor impression? Is that how you think he talks?
Number 10. First appearance, first defeat. During his very first appearance, Vulture ended up being defeated. He first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 2, and ended that first story he appeared in during the first half of the comic, of course, in prison. Vulture here manages to catch Spider-Man unawares the first time they meet, and even kinda captures him. However, Spider-Man escapes and later outsmarts Vulture, realizing that he relies on his wing gadgetry to soar and really has no powers of his own and is just kind of an old guy. Spider-Man creates a device which disables Vulture's wings. Next time the two encounter one another, he uses it during the fight and handily defeats Vulture just like that, clipping the old man's wings and leaving that bird to be caged. Sorry, Adrian. Number 9. Spotter needed. When it comes to Miles Morales' first trip out as Spider-Man, it was embarrassing for both Miles and the first villain he encountered on patrol, Kangaroo. Miles was wearing a Spider-Man costume after Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker, had died, and a lot of onlookers felt that this costume was in bad taste because of this. Miles also struggled somewhat with this instigation. He was just kind of getting the hang of his powers. But he got the final punch in his fight against Kangaroo, who had hoisted a car over his head and was about to throw it at Miles. Miles' punch to Kangaroo's chest causes him to drop the car on his own head, making him kinda knock himself out. How embarrassing. Don't worry, Miles does kick him away to safety, so at least he doesn't get crushed by that car. You should always be careful when lifting heavy objects. Case in point. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love when villains get embarrassed, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Inferior Superior. One of the most embarrassing defeats for Otto Octavius around has to be when Spider-Man's heroism and Otto's kinda lack thereof made him realize that despite being called Superior Spider-Man, Otto, who was in Peter Parker's body at the time, was not actually capable of saving the day here. He needed Peter's help. This caused Otto to relinquish the body he stole back to Peter Parker, who still had a remaining consciousness left within it. Surrendering, Otto would later show back up in a clone of Peter's body, but would eventually go back to being the regular old Doc Ock in the end. Stick to what you're best at, maybe, is the moral here. Although I won't lie, I did enjoy watching Superior Spider-Man thwip around the city, beating baddies in Spider-Man's place. There were some things he was pretty good at, but this just wasn't one of them. It was a neat time in the comics.
At number 7 is the time when, in the early days of The Flash, he basically gloats over the dead body of a villain he's just driven off the road. Something about the old-timey era of superheroes makes moments like this so much more bizarre, because it seems like the writers haven't quite yet gotten the hang of the characters. Like, I don't think this is something The Flash would ever do again after this instance, but it's definitely a humiliating way to treat this enemy. In this scene here, this bad guy named Satan, totally unrelated to the fallen angel, goes flying off a cliff in a car and explodes in the wreckage on the ground below. And of course, the Flash is already there to watch it all go down. He just sort of stands over him with his hands on his hips and says, "I'm on hand just to see your finish, Satan. Thus ends the threat of the Faultless Four." Considering that superheroes are known to have more forgiving moral compasses, this is a pretty dark and humiliating end for this Satan guy. And he didn't even try to hurt the Flash's family or anything. Damn. Okay, at number 6 is the time when the Flash basically drives the Top completely insane. In issue number 215, during the event Identity Crisis, the Flash finally captures the Top and has Zatanna mind-wipe him, turning him into a good guy. A once menacing and threatening villain, the Top is reduced to tears by the Flash after he is then forced to relive all his past evil deeds. And the Flash just sorta lets it happen. The Top becomes basically totally destroyed on the inside with guilt, facing his demons all at once as the Flash watches on. And tragically, the Top basically ends things for himself after everything is said and done. But the Flash doesn't seem to feel badly about it at all. He even refers to it as a kind of experiment and something he might try and do again. When I read that, I was like, whoa, Flash, chill out, dude. I think you got him. You definitely defeated the Top. You can just relax now. No need to try that out on anyone else. It's hard to watch, you know? What happened to putting people in jail and stuff? Alright, at number 5 is the time when the Flash kills Gorilla Grodd with a little sticky bomb. This is yet another savage moment for the Flash, or I suppose this is actually Scarlet Speedster, but he's filling in the role for the Flash, so it counts. During the Flash Annual number 3, the Scarlet Speedster is going back in time to correct some past evil deeds. You know, as he does. And on the way through time, he decides to take a quick stop at Grodd's lair. And while they duke it out for a while, the Flash decides that he's gonna take the gorilla out for good this time. So as he gets the better of Grodd, he plants a tiny sticky bomb on the ape and runs out of harm's way to basically watch the monkey go boom boom. As he's standing off to the side, his plan takes effect and the ape gets blown to smithereens right in front of him. What's humiliating about this moment is that Gorilla Grodd is just minding his own business before the speedster shows up and decides it's the end of the road for him. And as he's trying to disarm the bomb, or at least rip it off his skin, Grodd's fingers are just too big to get a hold of the tiny bomb. It's sort of a sad moment, really. But definitely pretty embarrassing for a villain that otherwise poses a decent threat in the previous storylines. Okay, at number 4, we have the time when Barry Allen, aka The Flash, of course this is a Flash list, breaks a tie on a vote for whether or not to wipe Dr. Light's mind. The rest of the Justice League is torn on the severity of the punishment for Dr. Light's assault of Sue Dibney, but The Flash, once again choosing to be a savage that day, decides he'll allow it to go forth, and turns Dr. Light into a shell of his former self, completely without identity and basically rendered useless. And Dr. Light is normally a super threatening bad guy, so this isn't a position that he's used to being in, you know, totally stripped of everything he's ever known like that, and it's all at the hands of the Flash. This dude can be a real monster sometimes, eh? Even when Batman finds out this happens, he's like, what the hell? And sort of confronts the Flash, who then, get this, mind wipes him too. I think this list is perfect for the Flash because he just seems to like doing business this way every once in a while.
Number 3, Back in Black. During the events of the Back in Black storyline, Peter dons his old black costume while trying to hunt down the person responsible for shooting Aunt May. He ends up discovering that Kingpin was behind the hit. In truth, it had actually been a hit put on Peter Parker after it was revealed that he was Spider-Man, but Aunt May was shot instead by accident. As Aunt May lay in the hospital fighting for her life, Peter decided to pay Kingpin a visit in prison. Not caring about his identity any longer, he even removed the top half of his suit, wanting Kingpin to know that this is Peter Parker fighting him, not Spider-Man. Peter brutally beats Kingpin up, humiliating him in front of the other inmates. The whole point is to show Kingpin just how strong Peter is and how he could easily kill Fisk, should he want to. He leaves Kingpin just barely alive to live with the humiliation of what happened, but does warn if Aunt May dies, then he'll be back to finish the job. Considering Fisk is all about being the strongest, most powerful guy in the room, this whole fight would be pretty embarrassing for him. Number 2, Hubris. A lot of Spider-Man's villains carry a certain kind of pride around when it comes to taking on Spidey. They often see themselves as better than Spider-Man, which is how they know they are sure to win. They also often see themselves as better than each other as well. And yet, often they don't end up winning. One of the most embarrassing and smartest defeats occurred when one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains had his ego used against him. Yep, we're talking about Norman Osborn. At this point in time, Norman was actually also bonded to the Carnage symbiote, turning him into the villain that we would refer to as Red Goblin. Well, together these two seemed pretty unstoppable. Armed with both the Goblin serum powers and Carnage's power set, Spider-Man managed to defeat Osborn by getting him to ditch the symbiote. Got in his head. And all it took was taunting Norman to do this, implying that a victory while bonded to the Carnage symbiote would be more a victory for the symbiote than Norman himself, and implying that Osborn couldn't beat Spider-Man alone. This prompted Norman to ditch Carnage, which of course resulted in him being defeated by Spider-Man and company. But really, Spider-Man. Number 1, defeated by laughter. And of course this list would not be complete if we did not mention one of the most embarrassing defeats of all time, and just in general, most embarrassing villains. Aw, sorry Peter. Paste Pot Pete. This one went down during the Spider-Man Human Torch team-up series in issue number 1. Here Paste Pot Pete is attempting to get revenge on the Human Torch, aka Johnny Storm, when he runs into Spider-Man. Spider-Man doesn't even fight this poor guy, he just defeats him by embarrassing him. When Peter Petruski reveals his intent and his villainous name of Paste Pot Pete, Spider-Man reacts not by attacking him, but by falling to the ground, laughing at the idea of his ridiculous villain name. Paste Pot Pete ends up just walking away, deciding he should probably change his name. Later on, he would become Trapster, which is a lot better, but still not great in terms of villain names that, you know, aren't ridiculous in some way.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Flash Freeze. Bart Allen is the grandson of Barry Allen. He skipped the whole teenage years and went to being an adult. You know, speedsters are wild. Thus becoming the Flash, I mean, for a small amount of time. Because the evil speedster, Inertia, aka Thaddeus Thawne, killed Bart Allen. Now at the same time, Wally West returned from his plane of existence, heard about the death of Bart, and started to join the hunt for Inertia himself. He was obviously very upset, but instead of killing him, he decided to freeze Inertia, like literally, like a living statue. By using his abilities, he slowed down Inertia's movements so slow that he's basically frozen in time. He's immobile. Literally a living statue, and his new home being the Flash Museum. While he's forced to look at statues of Bart Allen as Impulse and Kid Flash, he can still see and think in real time. He just can't move. That's like some House of Wax type stuff. He's just sitting there like, oh, sucks. Wally describes it best, saying he's forced to stare with eyes that take 100 years to blink at the ghost of a man he could never be. Oof, that's good. We love it. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you could go ahead and give us a thumbs up, because it helps us out a lot here at our studio. Well, here at our home studio for the time being. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. And back to our list. Number 9, World War Hulk. So Thor Ragnarok was loosely based off the Planet Hulk storyline. I say loosely because that story didn't end up going so well in the comics. See, on Sakaar, the rocket that the Hulk arrived in ended up blowing to smithereens, causing some casualties that left the Hulk, well, ready for some revenge, obviously. So he heads back to Earth, and thus begins the World War Hulk storyline. Time for some payback. While on Sakaar, he remembers who the real monsters were this whole time. I love this 5-parter a lot. The Hulk just destroys everybody. All the heroes that Earth has come to love just in the path of this beast. He locks the Illuminati in Madison Square Garden, so now it's like Madison Square Up Garden. So he locks them in and makes them fight to death. I mean, once you spend enough time on Sakaar, the whole gladiator lifestyle kind of becomes second nature, I guess. It's a bloody good read, not for the faint of heart, but it's one of the best stories. But it's one of my favorite Hulk stories, so you have to check it out if you haven't already. Number 8, Wesley Gibson and the Fraternity. Mark Miller, Marvel Comics writer, is the mastermind behind Kick-Ass and Wanted, both of which are mentioned on this list, of course, because their comeback stories are amazing. Beginning with Wesley Gibbons in Wanted. So we have Star-Lord sleeping with Professor X's wife, and well, it doesn't end well. Yikes. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, the Fraternity lied to Wesley in order to recruit him. They say his dad was killed by Cross, and Wesley has to avenge him by training to become his super assassin by Angelina Jolie and co. And it's pretty brutal. I mean, he really goes through it. So when Wesley's finally about to kill Cross, it's revealed that he's actually his father the whole time. Some Star Wars right there. So Wesley decides to plot an entirely new plan, to take out every member of the fraternity, and of course finishing off with Sloane.
Number 7, Rejected. We've seen this tactic used a few times to beat Venom. Initially, Spider-Man was the one whom the Venom symbiote wanted the most. Spider-Man was initially depicted as the first host, and has been the symbiote's first host in a few different versions of the tale. Although in the comics, Venom now has like a whole back history like before Spider-Man, so yeah. That is a thing that happened. In the Spectacular Spider-Man animated show, the fact that Peter is the first host remains to be the true narrative, as well as in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, or the Raimiverse as well, actually. In the Spectacular Spider-Man animated show, it's this connection to Spider-Man that Peter uses in order to defeat the symbiote. He creates a rift between Eddie and the Venom symbiote by offering himself to be the symbiote's host, suggesting that the Venom symbiote, you know, never really wanted to be with Eddie, and that he was basically kind of like a rebound for them. When the Venom symbiote decides to leave Eddie, this is seemingly confirmed, hurting their relationship. After bonding to Peter, they also learn that Peter was lying and didn't actually want to be with them. And while trying to make Peter be their one and only, he ends up being protected by the memories and mental manifestations of those he loves within his consciousness. You can't make someone love you. Sorry, Venom. You can try, but it's not gonna work. Number 6, Surprise Spider-Man. Surprise! It's Spider-Man! In Superior Spider-Man issue number 31, we get to see Spider-Man embarrass Green Goblin when his return surprises him. You see, Norman thinks that Spider-Man is actually Superior Spider-Man, aka Otto Octavius, but Spider-Man reveals that it's not Otto driving this time around, and that Peter Parker is truly Spider-Man once more. And of course, you know what that means. Green Goblin is going down, and Spider-Man is going to make fun of his man purse while he does it. Of course, Peter himself is also surprised to find Norman has changed his face, but this doesn't prevent him from kicking Green Goblin's butt, helping to free Otto's love, Anna Maria, and save the day. Number 5. A not so shocking defeat. Of course, Shocker is generally considered to be a B or even C list Spider-Man villain, and as a result he gets made fun of a lot in the comics normally. But it's somehow even more embarrassing in the Ultimate Universe. In issue number 8 of Ultimate Spider-Man, the issue opens with Spider-Man taking on Shocker and making embarrassingly quick work of him, asking who exactly he's supposed to be, the vibrator? Because yeah, the shock he's emitting is pretty weak. The other hilarious point here is that Spider-Man then turns the shock back on the Shocker, jamming his guns and basically causing him to shock himself. Ouch. Number 4. Watch your step. This embarrassing defeat comes to us from the pages of issue 230 of the Amazing Spider-Man comic. In this two-part story, Spider-Man took on the unstoppable power of the Juggernaut. While physically Peter struggled, Spider-Man eventually figured out a way to put a stop to Juggernaut without having to try and match his strength. Instead, he jumped on his head and he covered his eyes. Because they were fighting in a construction site, as Juggernaut flailed around trying to basically get the spider off his head, he accidentally stumbled into some wet cement, sinking down deep and finding himself trapped. So apparently take Juggernaut's eyesight away and he'll basically defeat himself because he's so clumsy. At least that's how it went down this time. Spider-Man of course just leapt to safety after Juggernaut was confirmed as stuck, taking the opportunity to make fun of all of his clumsiness. Poor Juggernaut. Stumblefoot, I think that's what he calls him. You Stumblefoot.
Number 3. The loop of life. Flash vs. Zoom. Everybody has that one memory they wish they could just delete from their brain, just delete out of existence. Maybe you're late for work, maybe you spilled coffee all over your new jean shorts, whatever the case is. Now, what if you had to relive that nightmare day over and over and over and over again, like Groundhog Day style? Well, that's what happens to Zoom. In The Flash issue 200, Wally West uses his powers to defeat him, when he freezes him and makes him repeat the worst day of his life over and over. Now, this is why I would like to be a speedster, this issue right here. I'd love to make everybody just chill out, especially right now, and just relive your best moment. Just sit there and be like, oh, we're going on rides. And then as soon as we're done, we're like, hey, the world's back to normal, what's up? No, this guy's like, nah, you're gonna repeat the worst day ever. Like, he just looks like he's in so much pain. The dramatic one teardrop too, like that's unpleasant. This is like an episode of Black Mirror. It's just a nightmare. So Zoom just sits and repeats the line, he doesn't have a gun, trust me Ashley, over and over and over again. Poor Hunter Zolomon. I mean, he's not the best guy in the world by any means, but this is literally torture, no? Number 2, The Punisher. After accidentally witnessing a mafia hit, Frank Castle's wife, Maria, and children, Lisa and Frank Jr., were both gunned down. So Frank Castle, being the only survivor, who is also a former US Marine who served multiple tours, has the Bronze Star, Silver Star, and 4 Purple Hearts, he decides to spend the rest of his life sporting that white skull on his chest and taking down any shred of organized crime. He was the only survivor, and initially he actually wanted to testify in court to identify the shooters, like a normal human being. But because the New York City Police Department were so tight with the mafia, he wasn't able to do that. Now he's fully prepared and equipped to kill everybody involved in the murder of his family. And it's a pretty good movie as well. Or show. The show's amazing. Watch the show, definitely.